The scent of truffle oil and searing wagyu hung in the air, perfect and heavy. My bistro Velvet and Vine was finally open. I had spent 6 months curating every detail, from the polished sink bar to the jazz playlist humming softly in the background. It was a masterpiece of atmosphere, and in the center of it all sat the VIP table. It was the best seat in the house, draped in white linen, set with my finest crystal, and marked with a small, elegant sign reserved for family. It was 8 p.m. The table was empty. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. I pulled it out expecting an apology text. Maybe traffic was a nightmare. Instead, Instagram refreshed. Joshua, my brother, had just posted a selfie. He was holding a bottle of expensive champagne, grinning widely with my parents, Jason and Angela, squeezed into the frame behind him. The background wasn't traffic. It was the velvet-draped interior of the Onyx Lounge. The caption read, "Real moves happen here. VP promotion. The legacy starts now." I stared at the screen. The contrast was sharp enough to cut. Here I had built a sanctuary of elegance and flavor. There they were, celebrating a title at a nightclub. They weren't late. They weren't lost. They had chosen not to come. The realization didn't land with a thud of sadness. It landed with the click of a lock turning. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. My eyes stayed dry. In a professional kitchen, tears are a liability. Salt ruins the balance of a dish, and emotion ruins the timing of a service. Tonight required absolute precision. I walked over to the VIP table, picked up the elegant cardstock sign that I'd hand-lettered myself, and snapped it cleanly in half. The sound was small, sharp, like a bone breaking, but in my chest, it felt like a heavy door slamming shut. I scanned the room. A young couple was waiting near the hostess stand, looking hopeful but resigned to a long wait. I waved them over. "This table is open," I said, my voice steady, betraying nothing of the crater that had just opened up in my life. "It has the best view of the open kitchen. Enjoy it." As they sat down, looking delighted by their luck, I pulled out my phone one last time. I didn't open Instagram again. I didn't want to see the neon lights or the performative smiles. Instead, I opened my messages. I typed one sentence to my father. "Table is open to paying customers. Don't bother coming." Then I put the phone on silent and returned to the line. For the rest of the night, I didn't think about them. I thought about the sear on the scallops. I thought about the temperature of the reduction sauce. I thought about the rhythm of the kitchen, the shouting of orders, the clatter of pans. I focused on the work because the work was honest. It gave back exactly what you put in. That was the thing my family never understood. They saw Velvet and Vine as a cute little project, something I did while Joshua was busy being a visionary. But this wasn't a project. This was 10 years of missed holidays, burns on my arms, and 16-hour shifts on my feet. As I plated a truffle risotto, I kept asking myself the same question. Why did I invite them? I knew who they were. I knew Joshua was the golden sun they orbited around. So why did I set a table for people I knew wouldn't eat at it? It's the trap, isn't it? It's not the cruelty that keeps you coming back. It's the breadcrumbs. If they were awful 100% of the time, leaving would be easy. You'd walk away and never look back. But they aren't. They're smart. They give you just enough hope to keep you starving. A proud of you text when they need a favor. A hug at Christmas when the cameras are on. A moment of attention that feels like sunlight after a month of rain. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanic that makes gambling addictive. You pull the lever, and most of the time you lose, but every once in a while you get a small payout. Just enough to make you think the jackpot is coming. You convince yourself that if you just work harder, if you just become more successful, more impressive, more perfect, they'll finally stay. But tonight, standing in the empire I built with my own 2 hands, I realized the machine was rigged. There was no jackpot. There was only the lever, and I was done pulling it. The realization didn't land with a thud of sadness. It landed with the cold, metallic click of a lock turning. By midnight, the bistro was empty. The staff had gone home. I locked the front door and turned off the lights. In the silence, I checked my phone. 19 missed calls. 14 texts. All from my father. I didn't read a single one. I just stared at the screen, feeling the weight of the silence. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for them to validate me. I had validated myself, and that was a dangerous thing for a scapegoat to do. The next morning, the bell above the door chimed. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The heavy, authoritative footsteps gave him away. My father, Jason, strode in like he was inspecting a property he intended to flip. He was wearing his deal-closing suit, the navy one with the pinstripes that he wore when he wanted to look important without actually doing any work. He didn't look at the hand-painted mural or the locally sourced flowers. He looked straight at me, his eyes scanning for weakness. "Rough night?" he asked, leaning against the polished zinc bar. "I was working," I said, wiping down the espresso machine. "Something you should try sometime." He laughed, a dismissive huff of air. "Always with the attitude, Oakley. Look about last night. We didn't mean to miss the opening, but Joshua had a huge opportunity. Some angel investors were at the Onyx Lounge. We had to support him. It was networking." "Networking at a nightclub," I said flatly. "Sounds productive." "It was strategic," he snapped, his patience already fraying. "Joshua is stepping into a VP role. It's a massive leap. But there's a snag." I stopped wiping. I knew that tone. It was the preamble to a bill. What kind of snag? A misunderstanding. A legal retainer fee that needs to be cleared before the board finalizes his contract. It's purely administrative, but it has to be paid today. We need $120,000. The number hung in the air, heavy and absurd. $120,000. That was my operating capital for 6 months. "And let me guess," I said. "You want me to write the check?" "We want you to invest," he corrected, smoothing his tie. "You have this place. It's got equity. You can open a business line of credit. Think of it as an investment in the family legacy. When Joshua gets the VP seat, he'll pay you back double." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see a father. I saw a man terrified of his own reflection. And then it hit me. The psychology of it all. It wasn't just favoritism. It was the golden child paradox. Joshua wasn't just their son. He was their mirror. He was the narcissistic extension, the projection of everything Jason and Angela wanted to be. Rich, powerful, admired. If Joshua failed, they failed. Their entire identity was wrapped up in the myth of his success. My success, on the other hand, was a threat. My bistro, my independence, my competence, it all highlighted Joshua's mediocrity. If I succeeded on my own terms, without their help and without their golden boy leading the way, it proved that the hierarchy was a lie. To maintain the family myth, they didn't just need to save Joshua, they needed to drain me. They had to cannibalize my reality to feed his fantasy. "No," I said. "Excuse me?" "No," I repeated, my voice calm. "I'm not investing. I'm not opening a credit line. The bank is closed, Dad." His face darkened. The mask of the concerned patriarch slipped, revealing the bully underneath. "You owe us, Oakley. We raised you. We fed you. We tolerated this little restaurant hobby of yours. Don't be selfish." "Selfish?" I laughed. A harsh sound that surprised us both. "Selfish is skipping your daughter's grand opening to drink champagne with your son. Selfish is asking me to mortgage my future to fix his mistakes the morning after you humiliated me." I pointed to the door. "I'm done, Dad. Get out." He didn't move. He stood there, red-faced and sputtering, like an engine failing to turn over. "You can't talk to me like that. I'm your father. And I'm the owner of this establishment," I countered, walking around the bar to face him. "And you are trespassing. You'll regret this," he hissed, backing away. "When you fail, and you will fail without us, don't come crawling back." "I won't," I said. "Now leave before I call the police and have you removed like any other unruly customer." He stormed out, the bell chiming cheerfully behind him. I locked the door and flipped the sign to closed. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt lighter. The air in the bistro felt cleaner, as if a heavy, suffocating smog had finally cleared. I had done it. I had fired my father. But as I turned back to my kitchen, I knew it wasn't over. Men like Jason didn't just walk away. They retaliated. And Joshua, desperate and cornered, would be right behind him. I needed to be ready. This wasn't just a disagreement. It was a siege. I thought drawing the line would stop the bleeding. I was wrong. It just signaled the start of the amputation. For 48 hours, the silence was absolute. No texts. No calls. Just the hum of the refrigerators and the rhythm of the prep line. I almost let myself believe they had accepted defeat. But I should have known better. My father, Jason, was a blunt instrument, a hammer looking for a nail. My mother, Angela, was different. She was a scalpel. She didn't make noise. She made incisions. The first cut happened on Thursday afternoon. I was reviewing the weekend orders when my phone rang. It was Marco, my contact at the vineyard that supplied our signature Pinot Noir. We had a handshake deal, the kind built on years of trust. Oakley, he said, his voice tight. We need to pause the delivery for Saturday. Pause? Marco, we're fully booked. I need those cases. I know. But look, I've been hearing things. About funding sources. About stability. He hesitated. Angela called the winery owner yesterday. She mentioned something about you having a mental break and using unverified capital to open the bistro. She said she was worried about your ability to pay your vendors. My hand gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. It wasn't just a rumor. It was a sniper shot at my credit rating. Marco, I said, keeping my voice level. My check cleared yesterday. My capital is clean. My mother is upset because I wouldn't lend her money. That's the entire story. I believe you, he said softly. But the owner, he's skittish. Fix it, Oak. Or I can't ship. I hung up. The kitchen suddenly felt very cold. This was the whisper campaign. It was Angela's signature move. She didn't scream. She dismantled your reputation over tea and sympathy. She was painting me as unstable and financially toxic to cut off my supply lines. If I couldn't get product, I couldn't serve food. If I couldn't serve food, the business failed. And if the business failed, I would be desperate enough to crawl back. But the real attack came on Friday night. The dining room was at capacity. The energy was electric, clinking glass, low laughter, the sizzle of searing steak. I was at the pass, expediting orders, feeling the flow of a perfect service. Then the front door swung open. The air shifted. It wasn't a customer. Two men walked in wearing windbreakers with state insignias. One was holding a clipboard. The other had a badge on his belt. Liquor Control Board. The music didn't stop, but the room seemed to hold its breath. In the restaurant industry, a surprise inspection on a Friday night isn't a checkup. It's a raid. Owner? The taller one barked. I'm the owner, I said, stepping out from the kitchen. I wiped my hands on a towel, my movements deliberate. How can I help you, gentlemen? We received a tip, the officer said, loud enough for table 4 to hear. Anonymous report that you're serving alcohol to minors. Systematically. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Serving minors wasn't a fine. It was a death sentence. It meant an immediate license suspension. Without a liquor license, a bistro like mine would be bankrupt in a month. That is a serious accusation, I said. And it is false. We need to check IDs. Everyone with a glass. Go ahead, I said. But while you do that, come with me to the office. I led the clipboard officer to the back. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were steady. I sat at the desk and pulled up the point-of-sale logs. We scan every ID electronically, I said, turning the screen. Here is the log for tonight. Every drink poured is linked to a verified age. And here, I pointed to the security monitor, is the 4K footage of the bar. You can see my bartender checking every single person. The officer scrolled through the data. He watched the footage. He looked for a gap, a mistake, a slip. There were none. I ran my floor with military precision because I knew, deep down, that I could never afford to be sloppy. 10 minutes later, the officers were gone. They found nothing. No violations. No minors. Just a compliant, high-end establishment. As the door closed behind them, I went back to the office and sat in the dark. I checked the time of the anonymous tip on the report the officer had let me glance at. It was filed yesterday afternoon, Exactly 1 hour after I told Marco that my funding was clean. This wasn't a warning shot. It was an attempt to kill. They weren't trying to get money out of me anymore. They were trying to destroy the asset so I would have nothing left to protect. They wanted me destitute. Because if I was destitute, I was controllable. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my father. I called Chloe. I need you to come to the back door, I said. Tonight. Oakley? What's wrong? They declared war, I said. And I'm done playing defense. It was just after 1 a.m. when the knock came at the service door. It was a timid, hollow sound, barely audible over the hum of the dishwashers finishing their final cycle. I unlocked the heavy steel door. Chloe stood there, shivering in the damp night air, clutching a waterproof document bag against her chest like a shield. She didn't look like the polished executive assistant I'd known since high school. She looked like someone who had seen a car crash and driven away without stopping. Come in, I said, stepping aside. She stumbled into the prep kitchen, the fluorescent lights washing her face out to a sickly gray. She put the bag on the stainless steel table but didn't let go of it. He's going to kill me, she whispered. If he knows I'm here. Joshua isn't going to touch you, I said, locking the deadbolt. Coffee or whiskey? Whiskey. Neat. I poured her a double from the bar stock. She drank half of it in one swallow, the glass trembling against her teeth. Then she unzipped the bag. You need to see this yolk. Before you do anything else. She slid a thick file across the cold metal table. The logo on the cover was for Apex Tech, Joshua's company. It was stamped confidential termination proceedings. I opened it. The words swam before my eyes, then snapped into focus. Embezzlement. Misappropriation of corporate funds. Unauthorized vendor payments. He wasn't promoted, Chloe said, her voice shaking. He was fired on Monday. The Onyx Lounge party? It was a cover. A way to buy time while he tried to beg the board for a grace period. I scanned the numbers. The missing amount was exactly $120,000. The legal retainer my father had demanded wasn't an investment. It was restitution. They needed my money to keep Joshua out of prison. They lied, I said, the anger burning cold and clean in my chest. They tried to make me an accessory. It gets worse, Chloe said. She reached into the file and flipped to the back. I found this in his desk when I was packing his things. I wasn't supposed to see it. It was a loan application from a predatory online lender, dated 6 months ago. The amount was $20,000. The applicant was Oakley Bennett. I stared at the bottom of the page. There, in shaky blue ink, was my signature. Except I hadn't signed it. I looked at the date. 6 months ago. The same week my father had asked me for a small favor to co-sign a lease, which I had refused. Joshua hadn't taken no for an answer. He had traced my signature from a birthday card or a check, committed identity theft, and blown the money before the embezzlement even started. The room seemed to tilt. The silence in the kitchen wasn't peaceful anymore. It was suffocating. My parents knew. They had to know. The desperation, the investment pitch, the sabotage, it wasn't just about saving Joshua's career. It was about burying a felony he had committed against his own sister. They weren't asking me to save the family. They were asking me to pay off the man who robbed me. The last ember of daughterly guilt in my chest turned into a block of ice. I wasn't their child anymore. I was the crime scene. Do you have the originals? I asked, my voice unrecognizable to my own ears. Yes, Chloe said. And the emails where he admits to the forgery. I closed the file. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I picked up my phone. Are you calling Jason? Chloe asked, eyes wide. No, I said, dialing 3 digits. I'm calling the police. The following afternoon, I texted my father. I'll sign. Bring Joshua and the paperwork to the bistro. We're closed on Mondays. Come to the back. He replied instantly with a thumbs-up emoji. The casualness of it made my stomach churn. He thought he had won. He thought the pressure, the sabotage, and the threats had finally broken me. They arrived at 4 p.m., strutting through the service entrance like conquering heroes. Jason was wearing the same suit he'd worn to demand the money. Angela was in pearls, looking around my kitchen with disdain, as if the stainless steel counters were beneath her. Joshua trailed behind them, looking pale but smug, clutching a leather portfolio. "You made the right choice, Oak," Joshua said, slapping the portfolio onto the prep table. "This is just business. You'll get your equity back once the IPO hits." "The IPO," I repeated, my voice devoid of emotion. "Right. Let's get this over with," Jason said, uncapping a pen. "Where do we sign?" "Right here," I said, pointing to the empty space on the counter. Joshua slid the contract toward me. It was a dense legal document transferring 40% of my business to Apex Holdings LLC, a shell company they had undoubtedly set up to launder the embezzlement repayment. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line. The room was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. They were holding their breath, eyes fixed on the tip of the pen, hungry for the ink that would save their skins. Instead of signing, I reached under the counter and picked up a small remote control. "What's that?" Angela asked, frowning. "Just checking the lighting," I said. I pressed the button. The motorized projection screen on the far wall, usually used for staff training, descended with a soft whir. The projector mounted on the ceiling flickered to life. A document appeared on the screen, magnified to 10 feet tall. It wasn't the equity transfer. It was the loan application. The one with my forged signature. "What is this?" Jason barked, squinting at the screen. "That," I said, pointing with the pen, "is a felony. Identity theft. Bank fraud. $20,000 stolen from your own sister." Joshua made a noise like a strangled cat. He lunged for the remote, but I stepped back. I clicked the button again. The screen changed. Now it showed the confidential termination proceedings email from Apex Tech. "And this," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "is the reason you're here. Embezzlement. $120,000. There is no promotion, Joshua. There is no IPO. There is just a thief trying to liquidate his sister's life's work to stay out of jail." Angela gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. But it wasn't shock at the crime, it was shock at the exposure. She looked at Jason. Jason looked at Joshua. They didn't look surprised. They looked caught. "You knew," I said, looking at my parents. "You knew about the forgery. You knew about the embezzlement. You weren't asking me to invest. You were asking me to be an accessory after the fact." "Oakley, stop," Jason growled, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Turn that off." "No. I'm not signing a check, Dad," I said, dropping the pen onto the metal table with a clatter. "I'm signing a statement." I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out a folded document. I slid it across the table, right over their fraudulent contract. It was the police report I had filed that morning. "Report number 24098, I read. "Filed at 9 a.m. today. Charges include identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. I also submitted the audio recording of you planning to strip my business for parts." Joshua's knees gave out. He slumped against the counter, sliding down until he hit the floor. "You called the cops?" he whispered. "On your own brother?" "You stole my name," I said, looking down at him. "You stole my credit. You tried to steal my livelihood. You aren't my brother. You're a liability." Angela started to cry, loud, theatrical sobs. "How could you? We're family. You're destroying us." "I didn't destroy anything," I said, my voice cold and final. "You destroyed this family the moment you decided I was disposable. The moment you decided my purpose was to be fuel for Joshua's fire." I walked to the back door and held it open. "The police are on their way to collect Joshua for questioning regarding the forgery. I suggest you leave before they get here, unless you want to be charged as accomplices." Jason stared at me. The bully was gone. The deal closer was gone. All that was left was a tired, defeated old man who had bet on the wrong horse. "You're dead to us," he spat as he grabbed Angela's arm and dragged her toward the door. "Good," I said. "I've been trying to bury that relationship for years." They left. Joshua scrambled up and ran after them, terrified of being left behind. I watched them go, watched them retreat into the alleyway like the shadows they were. When the door clicked shut, the silence returned. But this time it wasn't heavy. It wasn't suffocating. It was vast. It was the silence of a cathedral after the bells have stopped ringing. I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the tools of my trade, the gleaming steel, the heavy iron, the sharp knives. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of sanitizer and possibility. I was alone, and I was free. 1 month later, the bistro was fuller than it had ever been. The morning light streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. The reserved for family sign was gone forever. Every table was open. Every seat was filled. I was behind the counter, boxing up a dozen croissants, when I saw it. A customer had left a $20 bill on the counter, but under it was a napkin with a note. It wasn't just any customer. It was a local venture capitalist, a woman known for spotting talent and investing in integrity. I picked up the napkin.